Alright, and welcome back to Trigger Deck Tech. Alright, so we have here the green-black Aristocrats. I don't like that name because Aristocrats has been out of standard for a while. Let's just call it, Feed Everything to Nantuko Husk. Okay, so today we're going to be doing the green-black Aristocrats. The main theme of the deck is kill your own creatures and win the game. So these are your three possibly best cards in the deck. You have your Blisterpod, which is a 1/1 for 1 green. Basically, when it dies, you get a Eldrazi Scion, which is nice, can tap for mana, whatever. Zulaport Cutthroat's also pretty cool, because basically he's the card that would be killing your opponents for the most part. Whenever a creature you control dies, you get to gain a life and your opponent loses a life, which is pretty nice. And also you've got Nantuko Husk. He's pretty good for making sure your own creatures die, and he can get pretty big sometimes. Blisterpod here, the best part about him is that whenever he dies, you get another creature, which basically 1 mana fuels Nantuko Husk up to a 6/6, and if you have Zulaport Cutthroat out, you can gain 2 life and your opponent loses 2 just from that, which is nice. Okay, so I already told you about this. 4 copies of it, yada yada yada. Pretty useful. Alright, next up we have Bloodsoaked Champion. 4 copies of him. Basically it's just a good cheap creature to get out turn 1. You can attack with them, and if you attack, you can activate Raid and pay 2 mana and bring him back to the battlefield. If you attack the creature, yeah. Which is wonderful. And 4 copies of him. Next up, we have that other really crucial card, Zulaport Cutthroat. 4 copies, of course. He's the main finisher in this deck. And you can win in other ways, but it's really preferred to win with Zulaport Cutthroat because, like, gains you life. What's not to like about this guy? Look how friendly he looks with his big sword. Next up, we've got 4 copies of Nantuko Husk. Like I said, he's a great sacrifice engine since he can sacrifice at any time. Basically sacrifice himself if you have to, like trigger your own Zulaport Cutthroat here. It's pretty nice. Yeah, and he also gets pretty big in this deck. Like another card I have coming up later, it's a Hooded Hydra. Sacrifice that, get a bunch of tokens, and then sacrifice all the tokens, and he's like a 12/12, which is a-okay. But yeah, just remember, use these guys. Have them eat up your own creatures, and delicious nutritious. Alright, we also have another 4 copy card of Catacomb Sifter. Basically what it does is 3 mana 2/3 that whenever it enters a battlefield, you get a Scion, and also just because value, whenever another creature you control dies, you get to scry 1. So it's a decently sized body for 3 mana, plus another creature, which is nice. Another creature you can kill off. Very, very nice. Okay, now we're only running 2 copies of Smothering Abomination here. 4 mana 4/3 with flying and devoid. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature, and whenever you sacrifice a creature, draw a card. So the best part about this is that you don't have to only trigger it during like the beginning of your upkeep. Like every time it sacrifices, or anytime anything sacrifices, like even if it's a Scion being sacrificed, you basically get to draw a card and add the mana, which is very, very nice. I've said very, very nice a lot of times. I want to say it's super duper cool. Yeah, but the only thing is we're running 2 copies of these because, like, it's forced. Like you have to sacrifice a creature at the beginning of your turn, which is kind of annoying sometimes, especially whenever he's the last creature left, because like you want to swarm in, you want to attack him and like maybe something else, but if he's your only creature, you have to sacrifice him, and there you go, you have no creatures or anything. Oh, but you did get to draw a card, which is wonderful. And here we have our Hooded Hydra, Mythic from Cons. It's one of the few cards in here that's actually about to rotate out. What it does is it's 2 green mana and X. It enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters on it, or you can morph it and unmorph it for 5 mana. And if you unmorph it, it gets 5 +1/+1 counters. The thing is, that makes him a mythic, is whenever he dies, you put a 1/1 green snake creature token on the battlefield for each 1/1 counter on him, which is pretty useful for the fact that if ever I get board wiped, I can just still have creatures afterwards, and probably a lot of them. And not to mention the fact that I can trigger all my other sacrifice engines with this in here. Yeah, and he's a good budget version of Hangerback Walker, I guess. I know, not nearly as good, but still pretty good. Next best thing. And finally, we're only running one copy of Greenwarden of Murasa. It's a 6 mana, 5/4 elemental. Not the best stats for 6 mana, but whenever it enters the battlefield, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. That is very nice. And whenever he dies, you may exile him, and if you do, return a card from your graveyard to your hand. So 6 mana to get 2 cards back from your graveyard, and you can have a 5/4 body to attack and block with. I think that's pretty nice and useful. And he's only about $2 right now, so you can probably fit 1 or 2 in the deck if you want to make it yourself. Just something to consider. And that's all our creatures for now. Alright, for our non-creature spells, we have 4 copies of Bone Splinters. I honestly wish you could run 8. It's just a great card. So yeah, sorcery, 1 mana, destroy target creature, and you have to sacrifice one of your own creatures to pay for it. I mean, I have so many creatures in this deck, I just want to die. I mean, why would you not want to run this card in it? Next up, we have Grave Birthings, 3 mana instant. Target opponent exiles a card from his or her graveyard, and you get to put a 1/1 Scion in the battlefield, and get to draw a card too. I love all those cards that just say draw a card at the end. Just throw that on there so people actually use the card, so they don't think it's complete crap. Which, thank you, Wizards. I like it. And we're running 2 copies of those, and we're running 1 copy of Ultra's Reap. Just more card draw. You have to sacrifice a creature to cast it, but 2 mana, sacrifice, draw 2 cards. Not much to say. It's just useful. But I don't want to run too many because, like, I still don't want to sacrifice too many creatures. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. Moving on. We've got 2 copies of Evolutionary Leap. Basically, it's 2 mana enchantment. Pay 1 green, sacrifice a creature, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. You put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is actually, like, one of the most useful cards in the deck since we're running mostly creatures here. You're not going to really hit anything in here that's not... Like, you're not going to hit anything in here that's not very useful since, you have mostly cheap creatures, so lands don't really matter. And, you're definitely going to want to sacrifice something in this deck. So you can have, like, your small early game creatures and make them something bigger. And it's just card advantage too, pretty much. Gets stuff into your hand really easily, instant speed. So yeah, 2 copies of those. The only reason we're running 2 is because of the fact that they don't really stack. So if you have more than 1 in the battlefield, it just doesn't do anything. Except protects you from Dramoka's command, I guess. And last off, we have From Beyond, 4 mana enchantment. I only want 1 copy of this because reasons, you'll see. So at the beginning of your upkeep, you put a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token to the battlefield, and you can pay 2 mana and sacrifice this enchantment and search your library for an Eldrazi and put it into your hand. Yeah, like, the only reason I'm running 1 is because it's 4 mana. I'd rather be putting other things on the field. But I really like using this because I can easily search for what was that thing called? The Sacrificing Guy, Smothering Abomination, and put it in my hand, which is nice. Very useful. I'm sorry, I keep saying nice. But I'm a nice guy, I think. And that concludes all of our non-creature spells. Just running 7 swamps and 8 forests. Yeah. A lot of the spells in this deck require 2 green devotions, so need more forests. We have 4 Llanowar Wastes and 2 Jungle Hollows. Now, if you want to make this more budget, you can just take out the Llanowar Wastes and put in 2 more Jungle Hollows, budget hollows, and 2 more basic lands to make it a little bit cheaper. but I feel like the Llanowar Waste is just nice to speed it up, and it's not that expensive. And you've got Rogue's Passage, which actually can win you games. What you do is you pump up your Nantuko Husk and just make it unblockable with this. Very, very powerful. You need 2 copies of those, and 1 copy of Spawning Bed. Okay, so I want to like this card more, but I'm trying to test it out in this deck. I used to have more, but it never really did much for me. But I do like it when I do get to trigger it. Basically, you pay 6, sacrifice Spawning Bed, put 3 colorless Eldrazi Sonic creature tokens, yada yada yada. Yeah, it's 3 tokens, they're nice, but you basically have to tap this land, which is basically paying, kind of like paying mana, and then pay 6 more mana, which isn't really worth it, and you get rid of one of your lands. So, it's nice when I do get the trigger, but it usually ends up sitting there for most of the game, not doing much, because mana, so I'm probably going to take it out. Alright, so that about wraps up the deck, but we still do have to talk about the sideboard. Now, I don't really have a sideboard here for the deck made right now. I kind of did some chopping up for the video, but I've got Vampiric Rites here. It's a pretty good addition that I eventually decide not to put into the deck. So, 1 mana enchantment, pay 1 black, 1 general, sacrifice a creature, and you gain a life and draw a card. Like, I like the ability, I guess, because it's a sacrifice engine, but for 2 mana, I don't know. You have to sacrifice a creature. Like, for 2 mana and sacrificing a creature, I want more out of it, rather than just 1 card and gaining 1 life. Like, even if it, like, said you gain a life, your opponent loses life, and you draw a card, okay, I could live with that. That would have been good, but it's just falling a little short. But if you like it, go ahead, use it. Next up, Duress, just a really good sideboard card for dealing with control and such. Now, here's Hangerback Walker. Of course, you would always want to run 4 of these in this kind of deck, but if you're poor like me, you can't. And, like, I only got this one as a gift. Freaking $15. Brood Butcher's another interesting choice. 5 mana, 3/3. Yeah, already looking bad. Anyways, enters a battlefield with 1 Scion. You can pay 1 green and 1 black, sacrifice a creature, then target creature gets -2/-2 until the end of the turn. Yet another case of, I wish it did it a little bit more. Like, -3/-3 would have been beautiful, and just perfect. But, of course, just that's being too greedy, I guess. So it's just a useless rare. But you might like it, so I mean, if you can find a use for it, please do tell me, because I'm sitting on like 6 copies of this thing, and just have nothing to do with it. We've got Jotty Offshoot. It's a pretty decent card, actually. Gains you life. You can just play it down turn 1, have a small second engine, or if you need to block early aggro, he stops small creatures, which is pretty nice. And it acts as like a Courser Crucifix kind of, where you gain life whenever a land enters, which is something to consider, but I know it's not nearly as good. And last up on the honorable mention sideboard-ish thingy, we have Grim Haruspex. I think that's how you say it. So 3 mana, 3/2. Stats don't really matter because you're never really going to attack or block this thing. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. I just took this down in favor of Ultra's Reap and Smothering Abomination. They just do this a lot more efficiently, where you can just draw cards. Like, he doesn't feel good enough for 3 mana. Alright, and that's everything. I think it's a pretty decent deck. I do pretty well when I use it. I mean, it doesn't always win, of course, because budget, but I think it'd be a lot better if I had more Hangerback Walkers, I guess. Other than that, like, hope you guys enjoy the video. Be sure to like and subscribe so I feel loved. Bye.